Then we also target employee, and this is really more where we're focused, internal use of how do I onboard my support team? How do I onboard my back office? How do I empower them to work independently and consistently?
So I think that this is a challenge for every company, right? It's like, how do I hire people? How do I get them to do things the way I want them to do it? And usually we give them like very little information. We expect them to figure it out. They don't figure it out. Then we get frustrated with them. And then like the process just keeps going.
So the very first thing we do in the find and follow framework is what we call align and define. And that's where you go through a workshop either with yourself or your team to define in crystal clear terms, what does this person need to be able to do in this role? What questions do they need to answer? What problems do they have to solve? What tasks do they have to perform?
And we're back for another episode of the Startup Hustle. This is your host, Matt Watson. Very excited to be joined today by Greg DeVore. He's the founder and co-founder and CEO of ScreenSteps. Today, we're going to be talking about knowledge transfer and how he's bootstrapped a company for 20 years before first raising capital. You know, knowledge and communication are critical in any kind of business, especially in software development with what we do at Full Scale. If you can't communicate with developers about what you want them to do, it's nearly impossible to get the right result out of it. So communication and knowledge, all these things are really important to me, understand the value of them. So excited to learn more about that today. If you do need to hire software developers, you can check us out at Full Scale. Doesn't matter what your tech stack is, front end, back end, mobile, QA, whatever it is you need help with, check us out at fullscale.io. Greg, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your new book. And it's got the longest title ever, so I think I'll let you tell us the title. But tell us a little more about yourself, your book, and what you guys do.
Yeah, so the book is called Find and Follow, Reduce Supervisor Burnout and Improve Employee Performance by Transferring Knowledge Faster. And the book is really there to lay out a new way, a modern way of working and transferring knowledge to employees. The problem it seeks to solve is traditional methods of onboarding and empowering employees to adapt to change, to understand your procedures, to be consistent what they're doing, are breaking. Our workforce is turning over faster, change is happening faster, our jobs are getting more complex. And so that, sit next to me and just watch what I do for a couple months to figure out your new role or classroom lecture, that's not working. And this is a new approach to how you empower employees to work independently in your business.
So tell us a little more about ScreenSteps. You guys build a knowledge system type of software. Tell us a little bit about that too.
Yeah, well, ScreenSteps started out, 20 years or about 20 years ago as a $20 desktop utility. And all it did was help you create like a quick how-to guide in a PDF. And as it evolved over time, you get customers and they drag you up market and they wanted an online version and then they wanted an enterprise version. And so now we're a SaaS platform. We call it a knowledge operations platform that's really focused on similar to what a knowledge base was originally designed to do, but we found most knowledge bases don't drive any meaningful impact in the organization. You dump a lot of information into them, people don't use them. The ScreenSteps is designed to capture knowledge more quickly and design it in a way that it's findable and followable and scannable, meaning people can find what they need in 5 seconds. They can follow it without needing the assistance of a supervisor, and they can scan it, meaning they can follow it while they're talking to a customer or while they're working and not have to take a break and read a 20-page PDF to figure out what they're supposed to do.
So are you using this to target certain types of employees, certain types of use cases, or, for example, would you use this for knowledge base on like how to use ScreenSteps, like, that kind of like customer facing documentation, or what all kinds of documentation is this for?
So we use it both for internal and external. So we use it, all our support runs on ScreenSteps, and it works so well that we have, for the longest time, we didn't even hire a customer support person because we don't have enough volume. Our customer support requests are so low that we don't have that really tier one spot to have customer support. If anything's coming in, it's a bug or a technical issue that needs to be troubleshooted. So there's not there. So the system really works at matching the questions that customers have in that sense. Then we also target employee, and this is really more where we're focused, internal use of how do I onboard my support team? How do I onboard my back office? How do I empower them to work independently and consistently?
So I think that this is a challenge for every company, right? It's like, how do I hire people? How do I get them to do things the way I want them to do it? And usually we give them like very little information. We expect them to figure it out. They don't figure it out. Then we get frustrated with them, and then like the process just keeps going.
Yeah.
So, following your framework, what should I be doing differently? How do I fix this?
Yeah. So there's a couple parts to it. The problems we find is usually what, like you nailed it on the head there. We don't have clarity about what they should do. We don't have clarity about how they should do it. And they don't have clarity about how they're going to get those answers. So the very first thing we do in the Find and Follow framework is what we call align and define. And that's where you go through a workshop, either with yourself or your team, to define in crystal clear terms, what does this person need to be able to do in this role? What questions do they need to answer? What problems do they have to solve? What tasks do they have to perform? And you're looking at the triggers for those things. Like, what's the situation when they're going to have to perform this task or respond to this request? And you get this detailed list of what they're going to have to do. From there, you work backwards. So if they're going to do this without your help, what information would they need in the moment they need to do it? We then go through a process of separating out what's called foundational knowledge and actual knowledge. The biggest problem we have in transferring knowledge is we put it all into one big bucket and we just try to dump it all on someone at the same time. Foundational knowledge, when we separate that out, we make it much easier to follow the task. So you ever look at those online recipes and it's got like 20 pages about the history of their grandma, and all that sort of stuff, and you're like, just give me the recipe. You're skipping.
Yeah.
I just
scroll.
Yeah. We write documentation the same way. We don't realize it, but we do it the same way, where it's like, this is the background on this, and this is why we changed it 10 years ago, and this is why we do this, and here's how you do it, and then in this situation, you got to do something different. It's this meandering path that people can't follow. If we separate out the foundational, which are the concepts, the who, the why, the what, we teach that, and then we teach the employee not to memorize any procedural. The how, we don't memorize. That is designed as a recipe. So now the information separated out. I'm going to give you the background in a totally separate course or document. And then when you need it, you've got the recipe that is trimmed down to just exactly what you need.
So from a software development perspective, though, that seems, and software development's a little hard. It seems it's such a big challenge, especially with my old company, Stackify. We'd have to give people directions, like our docs would be like, here's how to do this thing with AWS. And if like you didn't know what AWS was or what Docker was or all these different things, it was like nearly impossible to write a doc, because like your point about, it has to meander around. Like, I don't know what my audience knows or doesn't know, but You're right. A lot of it's foundational knowledge versus like, if you actually knew these things, you'd only actually need to do these like 3 steps. Like you would know all the rest of it. So how do you still have to have all that information, right? But you're just linking it all together so they can see the different versions of it.
Yeah, that's a key thing of what we've designed into our software is we don't think of knowledge as just this flat document. It's more 3D. And so we're linking out to foundational knowledge. So we might reference that foundational knowledge in that actual recipe. So if you don't know what this is, it can pop out. And the way we design is they can zoom in. The less experienced user can zoom into more detail, while the more experienced user can stay at that higher level and not have all that foundational knowledge cluttering up the instructions they're getting. Another key part of that is you have to write your document assuming a certain amount of background knowledge. And that means that you've put it out somewhere else and you make that part of your onboarding and training, is getting them that foundational knowledge.
So is your software then like extremely opinionated about how people create this documentation to follow this pattern?
Yeah, it is very opinionated software. So it's not just a blank canvas where you like a wiki or a Confluence where you're going to sit down and just write random stuff there. We have a courses module, but it's not a full-blown LMS. It's very designed around creating these foundational courses. So if I were, say, for example, I'm onboarding someone and they're going to have to do stuff around AWS. I'm going to have a foundational course that's not going to make them an expert on AWS, but it's going to give them enough foundational knowledge that when I say AWS, they know what it is, they know the different tools they're going to use, they have a concept of where it fits in the universe. And then when they have to do something, maybe they need to configure a new EC2 instance, whatever that is, there's going to be a recipe there. Now, something like that EC2 configuring that, there's probably going to be different paths they have to go down depending upon the situation. So we would design a decision tree in our system that would say, okay, is this going to be in the US region or does it need to be in the EU? Okay, then, so it's basically, it's like this coach that's sitting on the side of them, just like if they called you up and said, well, what would I do here? And you're saying, well, what's this situation? What's that? Okay, then do this, then do this, do that. So it's really designed for that step-by-step how-to.
Well, and so do you struggle with getting your users to use the software in that way, right? Or they naturally want to go back to that blank canvas versus your software is forcing them to do things in a different way?
Well, so that's why we developed the Find and Follow framework. What we found is we had this software that was opinionated, but people would do exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay? And some people would take our software and they would have amazing results, and other people would have it and just get so-so or no results. And we're like, we want every single customer to be a huge success. So Jonathan, my other, I co-founded the business with my brother Trevor, and then Jonathan, another brother, joined us later. He was just tasked with going in, working with customers that were successful and understanding what they were doing, and then building a recipe that would work across any customer. So we learn and discuss and try out a framework with a new customer and then make adjustments. And over several years of doing that is when we came upon the Find and Follow framework. And we found when people apply that framework, so we take them through the whole process of doing that, they're successful every single time.
So did that mean you had to, you've been doing this for 20 years. So did you, when you first started out, was it much more of a blank canvas kind of support, documentation? And then over the last 5 years, you made the shift to making the software much more opinionated?
No, it was always opinionated software, but I don't think we had done a good job of articulating why it was opinionated or what it was opinionated about. Like, we had that concept in our mind vaguely. Developing the framework made us crystallize that and has brought even more of that into the platform.
Well, I think it's awesome what you're doing. You find a framework that that works, you're evangelizing it, you're creating a book, you're doing all these things, and that helps differentiate you. But does that also create challenges for you when you're trying to sell the service, like trying to educate the market?
No, it's a huge challenge because you're not just selling a tool. There's many times that I think, oh, if we were just selling a software tool, that would be a lot easier. This is more of a long game, right? When you're evangelizing a new way of working, but the changes are so huge. So, for example, we had a group in Southern California. In their organization, it would take 12 months for their employees to get to a place where they could work independently. So before that, they're, every single situation, they're escalating to a supervisor. After applying the Find and Follow framework and using ScreenSteps, they got that down to less than 60 days. So you take 10 months off of how long it takes an employee to become independent. It's life-changing for that organization, their customers, and the people in it. And if we just sell a product, we're not going to achieve that level of results. We've got to help them really change the way they work.
So do you end up selling them some professional services consulting on how to best use the tool, implement the tool, all that kind of stuff, not just the software itself?
Yeah, so we do it at kind of different levels. Obviously we've got the book if somebody wants to do it themselves. We've got courses if they want to do it themselves. But in a lot of cases, they will engage with us either on a coaching or a full implementation team to help ramp them up. But it's always with the mind that we're handing the project over to them because this new way of working, it's not just that we build it and it stays static. It's changing all the time. I mean, the knowledge your employees need is changing all the time.
Yeah.
So they're really getting to the place where they run with it on their own.
Well, I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges, especially when it comes to software, right? Like even your guys' own software, like, oh, we changed this feature, we add this button, we do this thing, whatever. Like, any magical tips on how to keep this stuff up to date?
The biggest tip, and we've built technology around this. We're continuing to build technology around this, but the biggest tip is to use it. documentation that gets used gets updated. And so we worked with one client, and they were, they had this big Confluence instance. And, the one team is like, we need to bring ScreenSteps in because we've got to train these people up. And some people in there were like, we've got this documented already. And they showed us their primary guide that was like their main troubleshooting guide for the business. It had 20 broken links in it. And nobody knew it. So the biggest thing isn't that the links are broken, it's that nobody knew. That means nobody's using it. And so that's one of the key things is when our customers, when they're using it, it gets updated all the time because the employees are saying, hey, this screenshot changed, or I tried this and the client said it didn't work. That feedback is coming back into the supervisors, managers, and they're updating right away.
So one thing I'm curious about is how has AI potentially changed what you guys are doing? Are you guys using generative AI to help people, at least just search your guys' system or do different things?
Well, AI is making this all really exciting because it's giving us tools to help people apply the framework more quickly, and then also just make the tool more robust. So we're using AI in a couple of ways. One of the biggest problems is getting knowledge out of people's heads. We're not good at documenting, and none of us are good at writing clearly, by default. So what we're doing with AI there is we'll do this workshop where we've analyzed, here's all the questions that need to be answered. We can then just interview the person who knows that, get a transcript of that, bring that through AI that will optimize that into a recipe versus, a word soup there. So we're able to optimize that documentation much more quickly using AI. The second thing that we're using is we're incorporating AI search and then AI answers, so I can then just type a question, and instead of saying here's the document, it'll still reference the document, but it'll extract the answer from that document for me.
Yeah, AI seems like one of the best use cases ever for that, right? Like instead of searching through a bunch of help docs, I can just ask a question, all that knowledge is there, it can give me the answer. Like it's like a magic for what you guys would do, I would imagine. So,
one big caveat there though, this is a real danger people have, is that when AI is not fed accurate information, it's only as good as the information that it's given. And so a lot of businesses are nervous about this because AI is inventing things or they have documentation that's conflicting. And so part of what we're building right now is how do you build that single source of truth? And now we have customers that are using this to feed their other AI applications because this can define that central source of truth.
So for your customers, I'm going to guess some of their knowledge based, that you're building for them is potentially sensitive information, right? That they may not even want to feed into AI. Like, how do you guys deal with that part of it? Do you guys host your own large language models and deal with all that, or how do you guys do all that?
So we make it all opt in, so the customer can opt in to the AI or not. But they also, when we're doing it, we're not allowing the large language models that we're using to train on the information we're sending. So it's only giving them a snippet to process and then forget back. So it's not being incorporated into that main LLM.
Okay. Yeah, that's the double-edged sword with AI is everybody wants to use it, but then they're worried about what what information gets fed into it and training it and all this kind of stuff. I imagine a lot of stuff I don't feel like is very sensitive, but everybody thinks it is. They think it's their magical recipe. It's like the KFC recipe is getting fed into the AI or something, but it's usually not that sensitive of information.
No, I think the bigger challenge. So it's a big concern, and one needs to be addressed. Like obviously, you don't want your internal procedures, AI suggesting those to somebody else in some other company someday, right?
Yeah,
you don't want that happening. But the bigger risk with AI is it being fed inaccurate information and then regurgitating that back. So I use a lot of support platforms, and a lot of have incorporated AI into their chatbots and those sort of things. The ones that tout like the best ones in the world, they're still giving me bad information. And it's not because the AI is bad, it's because the underlying knowledge is incomplete that's being given to the AI.
Well, and this is where they hallucinate, right? So I went in, I asked ChatGPT how to install Stackify, my old company, on like .NET, and it like gave me this great, pretty good documentation of like how to install it. And then I asked it like, okay, how do you install Stackify on software written in COBOL?
Yeah.
It gave me an answer.
Yeah, it's
But
very
it does.
confident.
Yeah, it does not work with COBOL.
No, it's eager to answer your question, and you have to keep that in mind. It's not eager to say, you know what, I'm not sure. So it's
Yeah.
always going to say, I know. And that's why you've got to be careful about how you bring AI in. We're taking the approach very much that AI is a human amplifier, meaning it can make me more productive, but it's not going to do the work of deciding what is truth. We still need a human that does that, and we need to present them with something that has been human vetted, versus just saying, hey, like you said, show me how to install for Cobalt. And it's like, oh, I can help you with that. I can do
Yeah.
it. You know,
Well, I do want to take a second to remind everybody today's episode is brought to you by Full Scale. We don't do COBOL development, but JavaScript, .NET, Python, PHP, Ruby, all these different things. You can check us out at fullscale.io if you need help building your team. I do have a question for you, Greg. Like the find follow framework you're talking about sounds really helpful. I'm curious, do you guys obviously you have developers that work for you. Have you found any ways to communicate better with developers around like how to build software?
I'd say it's something we're still working on. We're really good at applying the find and follow framework in kind of our support, our technical troubleshooting, those aspects. And quite honestly, we're still figuring out the best way to apply that for feature development.
Okay.
And some things that we're working on right now. One is, with software development, one of the biggest challenges is foundational knowledge. A developer comes into a project and they don't know all the landmines that are there, the things that they, all the aspects they need to be aware of. And so some of the things we're actually working on with AI is how do you take then a software developer who has that foundational knowledge, interview them, and get that out and format in a way that somebody coming on new to a project can understand all the background information very quickly instead of having to just listen and learn through osmosis a lot. But I would say it's something that we're still figuring out.
Well, it's always a challenge. Like software development is all about communication, and it's telling them what to do, what not to do. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what not to do is the most important part of it. Communication is a huge challenge.
Well, I think the one place where we are good at doing that is identifying where you can have recipes. So you can have recipes about how you track issues, how you triage bugs, how you do certain standard things in your application. So an example for us might be, how do you gate a feature? Like, you've got a recipe for that. So if you've got a recipe, then that developer doesn't have to like reach out to another developer. Oh, how do we gate the feature again? So build as many recipes as you can. You're still going to have areas where you need background knowledge and expertise. But if you get recipes in there, you'll decrease a lot of that cognitive work.
So I want to talk to you more about, this has sort of been, I don't know if you would call it a family business, but you and your brothers have been doing this for 20 years. And I know you mentioned it was two of you and then it was three of you.
Yeah.
What is it like working with your brothers running a business?
I say we got all of our fights out when we were little. So it was, we used to beat the tar out of each other as kids, but we got that out of our system. It's been great. I mean, I feel so blessed that I get to work with my brothers. It's not all my brothers. So I'm the oldest of 7 kids. There's only,
Holy moly.
yeah, there's a bunch of us, but there's 3 of us that work together in this business. And it's just a fantastic blessing. So, we're totally comfortable disagreeing with each other. We have vastly different personalities. But at the end of the day, we love and respect each other. And we always, we're working towards the right solution. There's not a lot of selfishness involved.
Well, I have 5 kids.
Yeah.
I don't have 7, but people look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them I have 5 these days.
Yeah.
But it'd be cool if one day they worked together and had a business together. And I'm always asking my kids what they're going to do when they grow up. And my oldest, who's 14 now, he always tells me, he's like, Dad, we're going to have to work at some place that's going to be a customer of one of your businesses. I was like, perfect.
All right. There you go. There you go.
That would be great. But it'd be great to see them work together. I imagine it's not all perfect though. I mean, you guys ever have any kind of issues or disagreements, and you're sitting at Thanksgiving and you're like, I can't believe last week you were a jerk about this thing. Like never any problems at all?
No, I mean, we certainly have disagreements, but I think we've never had resentment. We've never had like this moment where like, okay, I'm not talking to you for a week. There might be a time where, okay, we need to step away from this conversation for a couple hours. But I don't think it's ever lasted more than that. That's just not, we really try to keep focused on, the key is when, if you can keep selfishness out of it, right? And a thought that I know better than anyone else. If the way you approach problems is the answer is in the room, we all have input to get it. We can have strong opinions, but if we're really looking for the right solution and trying to dig that out, and we stay focused on that, we're going to avoid a lot of those interpersonal conflicts.
So I want to go back and talk about how you guys have been doing this for 20 years. You bootstrapped this company for 20 years. And I think there's a couple of topics here that are really interesting. So there's nothing wrong with bootstrapping a company at all. I'm a huge fan of bootstrapping. My first company, we bootstrapped over 30 million a year in revenue. We actually tried to raise capital during the recession and nobody wanted to invest and it was bad timing and all those things. But I'm curious, so after 20 years, why did you guys decide to raise money?
It was the right investor at the right time. So we would get inquiries all the time from private equity firms and seed stage VC firms. Quite frankly, there were certain aspects about the business that were really appealing to them, but there were aspects that weren't a right fit. And we weren't sure that we wanted to go on that ride of, when you take on VC capital, you're going on a different trajectory than maybe what we wanted to do. So we weren't really looking for it, but we got inquiries about it all the time. So I was asking, my nephew has been in a couple startups and he had worked with some investors. I said, I'm getting these inquiries all the time. What do you think? He said, oh, you got to talk to one of my investors just to get his thoughts on it. Turns out one of his investors was somebody I'd known since we were little kids, long time ago, but hadn't been connected for a long time. We just started talking over months and talking through things. And he finally said, you know what, I think, maybe it makes sense for me to invest in your business. And we were aligned on how we wanted to scale the business, how we wanted to run it. And so it was the right investor. And then we also felt like with AI coming in, it's enabling a lot of the things we've wanted to do forever. And we feel like knowledge transfer, knowledge management is becoming so important because of AI, of it being that central source of truth, that this was the right time to really invest. And we had the book coming out. We had a lot of great customer success stories. So it was the right time, right investor, and we've been really glad we did it.
So you said earlier it wasn't a right fit before. What was it about your company that people didn't think made it a right fit?
So they loved our retention numbers. They loved our market. You talk to our customers. They were very passionate about it. But quite frankly, we just didn't have the growth numbers that they wanted for that. It's different if you're starting out with just an idea, then everything's, possible. And so you can, maybe you can get funding for that idea, but they don't know yet if you're going to grow or not. Where we've been in business for quite a while, you can see those growth numbers. And we always grew, but we weren't growing at a rate that, a VC firm's going to go in and say, hey, this is what I want. This one, so, our investor, he spoke with our customers and he saw like there's real potential here. And now we're seeing those growth rates go up.
Well, what did you guys do differently? Was it taking that money and doing some key hires, ramping up advertising? Like, what was it that helped change that trajectory?
So part of it, has coincided with, I think really getting our story in place and the release of the book, but it also gave us, the ability, we never really had a marketing budget before. We'd feed everything back into the product really. So we made some key hires in customer success and operations and sales and in development that's helping us move faster, helping us, market more effectively and get our message out to more people.
So what do you see yourself potentially raising money again, or you think it's like a one round and done probably for you guys?
We're trying to be in a position that we have the option to do either. So we want to run the business. We're not a fan of running the business in a way that, if we don't get another round in 18 months, we're going to go out of business. We don't want to do that sort of crazy growth. But we want to be in a position that if we've got more opportunity and getting another round of financing would help us even do more there, we want to be in position to do that. So really, we want to put ourselves in a position where we have options.
So for a product like yours, I'm curious, how do you sell your product? This feels like a more of an enterprise sale, right? You're mostly selling to more probably mid-market, larger companies.
Yeah, we think of it more. We'll sell to mid-market, larger companies. We'll sell to smaller teams that are typically in that stage where they're scaling up, and then things are starting to break. We think of it more in teams. So, I'm not going to a company and just selling to the whole company. I'm selling to a team inside that company. That might be a large team. It might be 800, 1,000 people, or it might be a team of 10 to 20 there. The way we sell is when we talk to them, they're typically coming to us with a problem that they're having to scale up, things are breaking, their onboarding metrics are all off, their supervisors are totally maxed out, they're having to work after hours just to get their work done because they answer questions all the time. So something is usually pretty broken in the business. They come to us, and a lot of times they're just looking for a software solution. And we help them see that this is more of a behavioral and cultural problem in how knowledge is being transferred, and then help them put in place a plan to change that culture and use our technology to support that cultural change.
I'm curious what kind of sales and marketing channels work for you though? Like, is it reaching out to certain types of people on LinkedIn, or just certain advertising or trade shows or specific industry, or like what are those channels that work for you?
So traditionally our channels have all been really inbound and referral. It's
Okay.
inbound, referral, and expansion. Since we've had more of a marketing budget, we're doing more trade shows, more speaking engagements. We're doing more outbound, and more of a digital ad spend as well. So just trying to raise awareness of that. I'd say on the outbound, we're still figuring that out, but we're starting to see some sign that we just started that really in January. So it's still a work in progress.
Well, I'm curious what other tips you have for people out there that with this knowledge transfer problem. One of the things you mentioned earlier, a lot of the challenges with companies is they just have tribal knowledge. There's a lot of tribal knowledge, and the tribal knowledge is really valuable. It's really important, but I think part of your goal is to turn that tribal knowledge into like permanent knowledge transfer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's not even that. It's to change the way people work. So we have this thing we call the knowledge ops maturity model, and it's a measure of how efficiently you transfer knowledge in the organization. The bottom end of that is a tribal organization, meaning that the only way we learn anything is by talking to each other or looking through Slack messages, pinging people via email. And the next stage, we have what's called a document stage organization. And this is where they've said, okay, we can't do this anymore. We're going to document stuff. So we're going to write all this documentation down. Maybe we're doing it on a SharePoint or a Confluence or a Google Drive. But when you look at how people behave, when they don't know what to do, they're not turning to that resource. They're still reaching out on Slack. So you've made all this investment in documentation, but your behaviors are exactly the same. And so your results are going to be the same. Where we try to get people to at least is what we call the guide stage. And that's where I'm relying on guided knowledge to do my work all the time. So I've been doing this for 20 years. I use checklists, decision trees, reference articles to do my daily job all the time. And that makes me much more productive and helps me work with much less stress. And so it's not about, hey, this is a tool to train you. This is a tool to empower you every day when you do your work. And that's where we try to help there's stages beyond that, but we try to get them at least to that stage.
Well, this has been a great conversation, and I think, one of the last things I'd love to talk to you a little more about is the challenge of maybe changing a market. Where part of your challenge is going out there and trying to get people through these stages you're talking about, right? Tribal to document. They're using some sort of documentation software, be it Confluence, Google Drive, whatever it is. They're like, we have documents.
Yeah.
But how hard is it to try and change people's behavior and create kind of a new market segment? Like, I feel like that is always a huge challenge. And do you have any, I guess really the question is, do you have any specific tips in regards to that?
I would say it is a huge challenge. You have the business you have, there's times I wish that I was just, like I said, just selling a tool. That would be a lot easier. The advantage is you're able to make more meaningful change. Now, to get to a place where you're going to really change something significantly, you have to understand the problem completely. So you'll see people, they just start kind of building a solution to a symptom without really understanding the root cause. And that's what, especially Jonathan from our team, really doing that investigation, working with customers, not just asking them what they wanted, but observing where they were struggling. And then bringing insights across those to really understand the problem. Once you really understand the problem, you can diagnose the root cause. There's a great book called "What's Your Problem" by Thomas Wettlesberg. A tough last name there, but it's basically about the way you frame a problem determines how you solve it. And so if you reframe a problem, then you can also often come up with much better solutions. And that's what we're trying to help people do, is reframe this training problem or performance problem into a knowledge transfer problem. Because if I reframe it that way, what I can do is totally different. The possibilities are much bigger. So yes, it's a challenge, but it's an exciting problem to tackle.
Well, it also becomes a key differentiator, right? Where you're like, it's like, yeah, we're not Confluence, we're not all these other things. We're this other thing over here. And that'll get people to go, that's interesting. Tell me more, right?
Yeah.
But then you have to actually convince them to go that way.
Yep. No, you have to make that path clear.
And my previous company, Stackify, which we're recording this on May 1st, and I sold Stackify to Netro, and Netro sold it to BMC, and it closes today. So yay!
Hey.
So kind of interesting event for today. But part of our challenge is we were trying to sell application performance monitoring tools to software developers, which software developers traditionally didn't use. Honestly, they were actually used more by sysadmins, like operations team. And it was a huge challenge for us trying to like get developers to think that way and do that and whatever. And it was a huge uphill battle for us. And it was also our differentiator. So some people saw it and they're like, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. I want that.
Well,
So I feel.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
So I feel like I relate to that same challenge, right? Like trying to define a market or change behavior market was very, very difficult for us. And I would say we succeeded, but never really got the flywheel and like the growth engine really, really going. It was like a very slow growth, and we never figured out how to really get it going.
No, but I'm guessing you found this, that when they understood your point of view and the real problem you were helping them solve, then the software became a much more natural decision. It was really
Right.
they had to buy into the approach that you were doing, and that is, it takes a lot of education. Our strategy right now is we have certain verticals that we're working in, and the transformation in the businesses is so dramatic. Like you're seeing onboarding times drop by 75%. You're seeing employees literally double in productivity. That if we can get far enough in those different segments with a critical mass in each one, then this becomes just the way you have to work. It's really a modern way of working versus a traditional way. So, it may pan out for us, it may not, but that's our vision.
Well, this is a fascinating time now with AI, and I think there's so many opportunities for your company and what you guys are doing and how it relates to AI, building, some kind of AI chatbots based on all the knowledge in your system and all these different things. So it's got to be an exciting time for you guys. Like that is such a like toy to play with. So
yeah,
but it's also could be a big distraction.
No, you have to be very strategic. AI is such a great demo. I mean, you can play around with it. You can do so many cool things, but when you're going to get down to, we deal with regulated industries, healthcare, finance, technical support. It has to be right. You can't afford it. So when you get down to the applications, you have to get out of that. I'm going to play around with this mode and really figure out, okay, how am I going to use this in a way that we can trust?
Well, tell us a little more. Remind us again about your book, where they can get your book, and a little more about your guys' company.
Yeah, so you can get the book at findandfollowbook.com. The book is Find and Follow, Reduce Supervisor Burnout and Improve Employee Performance by Transferring Knowledge Faster. Has a bunch of case studies in there, lays out exactly how you approach this in a new way, why your traditional ways of training won't work. And then if you go there, we also have a free 30-minute course on the concepts. If they want to get in touch with me, I'm on LinkedIn, Greg DeVore, or you can just go to ScreenSteps.com, reach out that way.
Awesome. And you can watch this on YouTube. We will publish this on YouTube. And if you're not subscribed to my newsletter, the Startup Hustle newsletter, please go subscribe at startuphustle.xyz. And thank you guys for listening today. And Greg, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Matt. It's great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.